Now we will have the session with Dan Winter, and he will be the leading of the panel on bioarchitecture. Dan, you are here? Yes.
Hello, yes. Can you hear me okay? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you well. Yes, thank you.
Can you hear me okay now?
Yes.
Great.
Someone make sure that Dan Winter has the pin, please.
Hello. I'm so glad to be here, and I'm so glad to introduce this section, which is on eco-biologic architecture. As they said, the physics of housing. It's really about the science of what makes a building alive and what makes space alive. And we've been pioneering that for many years. Actually, my main function here today is to introduce our guests, who first will be Juan Schlosser, who I've known for many years, and then an exciting guest named Alosha from South Africa and Russia, and you'll hear more about that. As I do this intro, which I'm very pleased to do, of Juan Schlosser's work, bioarch.co, I wanted to give a short introduction to how we've been pioneering biologic architecture as science, actually as electrical engineering, for many years. And we've made great progress, and our curriculum in biologic architecture is now being used in many countries. As Amar beautifully said, I really appreciated Amar talking about natural buildings. And I really loved Helena's talk earlier about eco-community and villages. It was fabulous. But the point here about, as Amar was saying, about if the building was made of soil, for example, you felt like you were in a womb. Well, we're able to teach that using science so clearly that you can actually measure whether a building is going to make a seed germinate. And that's the point, that now that we know the electrical field theory, the actual physics of what makes a building alive, we can teach biologic architecture as a profound and important science and make sacred space and the space that gives life measurable. As we say, we decide which architect gets a paycheck by measuring whether that building will cause a seed and your child to grow. And beautifully, Juan Schlosser, whom I'm introducing here, has pioneered our measurement technology. So you can see the background of our biologic architecture work for many years at goldenmean.info/architecture. And you'll see we held the world's biggest international conferences in 3 continents on biologic architecture, including University in Mexico City. Now, we've launched that into a global network of biologic architects, bioarchitects.net, and you'll find Juan Schlosser there as well. In addition, you'll find Michael Rice there, who's a wonderful biologic architect from Ireland and now Europe, who is the person who recommended Alosha. And Michael Rice is also a fabulous shaman. So you see an introduction to a real global network of biologic architects. And living space, living life force in buildings is so important. I mean, basically, if your building is steel and aluminum electrosmog and bad air, then your aura is not going to grow, and that ain't spiritual. And so we're teaching that as a science, that at a university level, you can actually teach what biologic architecture is. And I'm going to do another 2 minutes on that subject, and then turn this over to Juan, who you'll see has beautiful slides. So I just want to explain the core science, and let me see if I can do this in 1 minute flat. Supposing you were wondering, what is the difference between a live seed and a dead seed? And supposing you were electrically oriented, I've been an electrical engineer all my life. So how does an electrical person define the difference between a live seed and a dead seed? Well, obviously, in a live seed, it's going to be able to suck in that first nutrient. And that first suction effect actually is quite literally charge implosion. So that really sucks, doesn't it? No, I mean, but you get the physics. So electrically, that charge implosion, which creates suction towards center, turns out to be the definition of life, not just in a seed, but also in your brain, for example. If your electric field is centripetal, the focused human attention causes charge to compress. That's called charge implosion. That's the basis of my life work, and it's a fractalfield.com. Point being if you want to apply that to architecture, we now know that we can measure in advance, when the architect is done, whether that building will cause a seed or a child to grow. And that measurement is, we take a brainwave sensor, and I pioneered this thanks to Phil Callahan many years ago. And you'll see our measurement technology at flameinmind.com/lifeforce. And essentially, a brainwave sensing device, if we wet these sensors just a little bit and place that next to a tree or inside Juan Schlosser's bamboo construction, he's going to show you the measurements. And what happens is capacitive coupling will measure up to 1/1,000,000th of a volt as a wave shape, a weak charge field inside that building. And then we take a spectrum analysis, a harmonic signature, and measure the frequencies. And that will tell us if that weak electric field is imploding and therefore alive and therefore sacred. And Juan Schlosser helped us to actually do that in buildings, defining the difference between his beautiful bamboo biologic structures and steel and metal buildings, and proving you could predict in advance which biologic architecture was going to cause a seed to grow, defining sacred space and the availability of bliss. And by the way, Juan Schlosser also, he's very scientifically competent. He's actually done work measuring and developing the implosion technique in water vortex that actually makes charge from a vortex, which is actually what you need to do in sacred space and during bliss. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Juan Schlosser, bioarc.co. And Juan, you have about a half hour, and we're looking forward to your pictures too. Go, take it away, Juan.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Dan. Thank you so much. I love your work. I follow you for so many years, and it's an honor for me to be here tonight and do this presentation. And as Dan said, well, I'm not really a technical guy. I love the science. I follow this, I read stuff and books and listen to lots of lectures and really try to educate myself about all of this stuff. But my intention really with knowing the science is really being able to apply it, right? To apply it into design. And that's what I really focus most of my time doing. In any scenario, I think, because of my particular point of perspective, being not a technical guy, I like to explain a little bit the science that Dan talks about, and lots of the main principles. And I'm gonna try to be very simple here. So we want to reach a lots of people, so everybody can, even the non-technical people, the non-scientific minds, can really understand some of these principles. It's not easy, but it's not necessarily too complex. But I think this is very, very important, because also this has to do with, Amar, I think, was talking about, there is a lots of building regulations in the architectural world. And as an architect, we go through a lots of you gotta pass building codes in order to build something. But interesting and surprisingly, a lot of the science that we are talking about here in bioarchitecture is not contemplated in any building code. So I wish that at some point in the future, these things that we are presenting here and that Dan has been talking about for many years will at some point actually be in, people will have to actually prove that that buildings actually have to follow this kind of energetic principles in order for them to be regulated and pass through code. So anyway, I'm gonna jump into sharing my screen, and I'm gonna start to show some slides here. All right, 1 second. Okay. Okay, so the title of the presentation is Biologic Architecture, Science and Real Application. So let's talk about two main fundamental principles. I call these the 3 keys to bioenergetic design. And there are 2 principles that we need to understand in order to comprehend how a building acts as a capacitor in order to harvest this dielectric electrostatic potential that exists in between the ionosphere and the surface of the Earth, which is called the Schumann frequency. So that's one of these 3 keys really is what defines how a building will be considered a healthy environment for you to live in. there are many other considerations, but I believe as bioarchitects, these are the three keys. These are the three fundamental notions that we need to comprehend in order to create buildings that actually are able to qualify as bioarchitecture. So let's say their frequency, let's define what is their frequency, also called the Schumann frequency by the scientists who discovered it. So these are a series of resonances. It's not only one frequency, but a series of resonances as well, apart from the key frequency. So these frequencies actually are generated in the cavity that exists in between the Earth surface and the ionosphere. So that's a resonant cavity that has a specific frequency and have a series of harmonics. And that's what we call the Schumann frequency. So they are extremely low frequency in range, which is called ELF, which is extremely low frequency. So these frequencies, as Philip Callahan discovered, and as Dan continue, that research further and really develop to a whole another level, these frequencies are essentially harvested by ecosystems, by trees. So Philip Callahan was able to measure these frequencies in the weak electric field of trees, but also they can be harvested by structures and buildings, and that's what's happened. They can be harvested, or in another scenario, like most of modern buildings, they actually bleed these capacitance, and you cannot measure the Schumann harmonics in most of modern buildings. And the presence of that frequency, the Schumann harmonics, is actually very beneficial for health. That's something that we know. So Philip Callahan, which was the first scientist who really came across this principle, explains how trees and forests are a type of dielectric antenna. So they are a dielectric antenna that tap into the Schumann harmonics at a very low frequency, ELF. So he discovered that when you measure the weak electric field of the tree, you will find that you can measure the Schumann harmonics out of the living tree. But in the other hand, if the tree was actually not healthy, the Schumann harmonics were not present in the weak electric field of the tree. So you could actually use this as a form of diagnosis of the health of a tree, and virtually you could measure the health of an entire ecosystem, I believe. So the question is really how we extend this to our structures, the buildings we create and design, because they also have to act as dielectric antennas to harvest and dielectrically coupled to the Schumann harmonic cascade. So
Juan, we could mention that the harmonic geometry of that cascade, we now know actually fits the equation for implosion. So the reason Gaia is negentropic is the same reason a tree is, because it knows the music of implosion. So if we do our buildings for that, then we have a bingo. Go ahead, Juan.
Beautiful, very nice comment. So let's say, this also connects to what you are saying, because life is negentropic. So why the Schumann frequency is so important to biology? What's happened, for example, to astronauts when they go to space? They have to carry the Schumann frequency generator with them, because otherwise their health start to fall apart, because they need that negentropy in order to be healthy. And this has been proven, in experiments with when the Schumann frequency was discovered. If you insulate a human being in a Faraday cage and they are completely insulated from the Schumann harmonics, they become sick. They start to feel depressed. Their entire biology start to fall apart. And so this is a fact. So what's happening in modern buildings is like they are not completely insulated, but they are depraved to a big extent of these harmonics. This is why health begin to deteriorate in people who live in modern structures many floors above the ground, surrounded by steel, which completely bleeds the capacitance, etc., etc. So another interesting concept here is that really demonstrates why the Schumann harmonics and the Earth frequency is so important is the work of Lou Montagnier, which basically is, he was working with DNA replication. So he finds out that when you play this frequency, suddenly the DNA spontaneously generates in water. So I found that, like, his experiments have a lot of, there is much more conclusions that we can take out of his experiments. But one is that the Schumann frequency is fundamental for DNA replication. And this is one of the reasons why when you are absent of it, your DNA, your cells are constantly replicating and regenerating. So if the Schumann frequency is not there, you will experience some trouble and some health issues, obviously. So that's just another interesting clue.
And we actually have measurements now that the Schumann cascade in plasma, like Therify.net, will cause a plant or its seed to actually revert to a pre-genetically engineered state. So we can actually prove going backward in time toward increased order, the definition of negentropy. So that implosion is all present in the Schumann music.
Yeah. So
and Juan puts that into his buildings.
There we go. The buildings are able to generate a weak electric field, which is very much what the Therify is creating, right? So, and this really leads us to another concept here, is the materiality, the materials, like why materials are so important to create buildings that are actually able to sustain this capacitive field. In most of cases, dielectric materials are the most optimal to create structures and not metals. Why? Because we need to understand what is a capacitor, right? So a capacitor is an electrical device that stores an electrical charge. That charge inside of the capacitor is called capacitance, okay? So essentially, what a building is the dielectric, is a dielectric material that is sitting in between the surface of the Earth, which is negatively charged, and the atmosphere, which is positively charged. So any material or any object that sits in between that electrical potential is by definition a dielectric and is acting as a capacitor, but is essentially a very large capacitor and a very complex capacitor. That's why Philip Callahan called this as well dielectric antennas, because they are dielectric in nature and they exhibit capacitance. Yeah.
I was just going to say, just 30 seconds on what dielectric means. It just means how efficient is charge distributed inside the material. So if there's a high dielectric material, then the capacitance of charge moves around inside very efficiently. It literally rings like a bell. So that's why natural biologic material have high dielectric constant. And so that's why your aura breathes inside a clay building, like Amar was saying. Go ahead, Juan.
Yeah, the electric constant is a very interesting, very important term to actually understand for people. It's just what you described, like the electric constant is the permeability of a material in being able to concentrate electric flux. So it's permeability in the same way that, something is permeable. It's like the electric flux is able to permeate that material, to go through it. And there is, many people understand more the concept of coils, for example. So if you have a coil and you put an iron core, which is something ferromagnetic, you increase the magnetic field and that iron core has a very strong magnetic permeability. So here is the same concept. When you have a dielectric material, if the dielectric material have a very good dielectric constant, then that increase the electric flux density of the capacitor, which is basically the building. So the more natural your materials are, because naturally by definition, natural materials are produced to exhibit high dielectric constants, the more the electric flux will be able to, your building will be able to sustain. And that will be very beneficial for life. That will be very beneficial for storing the Schumann harmonics, which are so beneficial for our health, etc., etc. So
It's beautiful. And just to say that, dielectric constant just means charge is distributed so efficiently. If you can make a phase conjugate mirror if you have high dielectric constant. That's how you make time reversal and make entropy first time. And by the way, high dielectric constant is how the ancestors made ancestor phone calls in obsidian mirrors, and it's the physics of alchemy. So studying high dielectric materials that breathe charge beautifully, like the lithium niobate when Scotty says, beam me up, Scotty, the warp generators. It's all about high dielectric. So it's a beautiful thing to study.
Right, that's really bring us the notion of sacred space, and why many ancient buildings and sacred structures were built using these high dielectric materials, because that's where they could have these profound spiritual experiences, where they were able to connect to that collective mind and also have Kundalini experiences and peak experiences of all different types. So buildings should be able to not just provide health, but also to lead you to that kind of deep spiritual experiences.
Exactly.
And that's really
Sacred
the function
space.
of sacred space, right?
Yes, exactly.
So yeah, fractal antennas, complex antenna designs, fractal antennas are what trees are, and buildings also should be designed in such way, which that's what the whole biomimicry, energetic biomimicry, that's a concept I like to talk about. Is really mimicking nature in the way nature creates fractality in order to generate these dielectric fields, which are so beneficial for life and for spirituality as well. And then I like to bring something up as well, the principle which really have to do with shape energy, which is the concept of the resonators, dielectric resonators. So in electronics, we have something called dielectric resonators, which are basically cavity-like structures made of ceramics, interestingly, that where the waves get confined inside of these resonators, they binds back and forth, and they amplify it, right? They amplify these frequencies. So these resonators can be tuned. That's exactly how it's done in electronics, right? So you have the micro to the macro, which is a building. You do it in electronics. It works in a very electronic devices, what all our electronics are using. But these physics are also applied to buildings, and buildings can act as resonators, can amplify specific frequencies, and can enhance these energies even further to create a very beautiful healing effects and generate a sacred space and produce all these beautiful energetic effects that we would like to generate in bioarchitecture. So
You have about 10 to 15 minutes. You're about halfway through. So go ahead, Juan. Go ahead.
15 minutes.
Beautiful.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have so many slides, man. I think
Yeah, that's what I mean. Keep rolling.
Really, but okay. So many ancient cultures really understood these principles of subtle energy in relationship to form, etc. Like we know, human-made antennas which cover the planet similarly capitalize on the properties of geometric shapes. So Professor Philip Callahan actually spoke about this, where he says religious structures throughout the ancient world were fine-tuned dielectric antennas which collected energy from the sun, the earth, and the cosmos, and then passed it into the meditators, religious practitioners, and the environment around the structures of these temple structures. So now we're going to talk about what Philip Callahan did. Basically was like and we already talked about it, but he was essentially measuring the field effect of trees with his because he was a radio, he was working with radio, right? So he had radio amplifiers and a spectrum analysis. So he took his probe, and then he put it into a tree, and he measured the earth harmonics. So he found out that the earth harmonics were present in trees only when they were healthy. So he has this intuition that probably buildings will be doing the same thing. So he knew this village in England where people were living a very long time, over 100 years, right? So he went to this village, and he spectrum analyzed the structures in which these people were living. These structures were made of earth and hemp, interestingly, and he, voila, the Schumann harmonics were there. So he basically proved for the first time that structures are able to act like trees and leverage and the Schumann harmonics to produce these healing and life-enhancing effects. So can we replicate these studies today? Yes, Dan, Winter, and have created this functional app, which is basically an EEG headset, like he showed before, which measures the weak electric field of the brain. So in the same way that you can measure a weak electric field, which is a brain wave, you can also measure a weak electric field inside of an architectural environment, inside of a structure, because that's exactly what it is. It's a weak electric field that that is present in the environment. So this, and when I use it, and we were doing this work together, I was basically helping Dan to put together this, to do the beta testing of the software. So we essentially put together 80 pages document where we measure 6 conventional buildings and 4 bioarchitectural environments, and then we cross-reference as well this with the GDB. We did measurement of electric field, magnetic field, radiation field, and we also did biogeometry, so using pendulums. And we collected the results, and we put together this whole document, which I think was an amazing piece of work and very interesting to actually put it together.
It's beautiful. And we're eternally grateful for your help, Juan. It was great. It's all and Juan's website or our website, goldenmean.info/architecture. Go ahead, Juan, please keep rolling.
Yeah, that was a beautiful work. So here I want to show something. This is actually me measuring a tree in one of my projects, in Shambhala project, which was a remote island in Indonesia. There was no electric grid here. The closest place where there were anything was like, many kilometers away. There was an island in the middle of the ocean. So I went with the muse and the flame in the mind, and I put the muse into this tree, and I measure one of the most cleanest environments without electromagnetic pollution that I ever, because I was doing all this work before, this was after it, right? So I realized how pristine energetically and is this an environment like that is. And you can see these can't be electromagnetic radiation coming from anything, because there wasn't really an electric grid. So each one of those peaks is the breathing electric field, weak electric field coming out of the tree. And you can see how spot on all the harmonics of the Schumann frequency are in there.
The known Schumann harmonics are in blue. The measured frequencies there are in white. And you can see that cascade effect. So the tree is singing to Schumann. It's gorgeous.
Yeah, this measurement is absolutely gorgeous. I love it. And then, okay, this is just a few slides of that document. It's a big document. I can present the whole thing because there is way too many measurements, but this is the most relevant. So this is the first house that we measure. That was just a standard concrete architecture structure that that we found, just a friend that was living in that house. And this is sort of the bottom line. So this is the GDB. You can see the graph there with the measurements, and this is the Schumann harmonics in there, which there's a lots of noise. Then we have the seed germination, and that you can see the side of those seeds. Then we went to another concrete house, and then we took the measurement. Same thing. You can see the seed growth, the GDB is pretty much the same energy levels. And it's still quite noisy. And then here we go into one of our structures. So this is a bamboo structure, a dome. And you can see how the seeds actually started to grow quite a bit more. And the GDB is actually measuring quite a bit more of energy in that space. And the Schumann harmonics are present there. Unfortunately, it's very hard to take these measurements because there is lots of noise in most of spaces. So where we are able to take really true measurements is where we were a little bit, structures that were a little bit far from electrical grids, etc. This is then our last measurement, which is the office, the New Earth Development Office that we have next to here, which is actually, you can see the incredible difference in the GDB measurement, how much those graphs are actually in comparison with the first concrete structure. There is way more energy in everywhere. You can see this, the seed germination really made lots of difference of how it grow. You can see a lot more presence of the Schumann harmonics. In this slide, we can see also all of them together, the 5 more relevant measurements, and you can see how the difference in between the seed germination and the weight, like the sizes in between the office where the seeds were germinating are like substantially different. So these are some of the effects that we're able to measure.
So as Juan mentioned, that the one house was actually concrete, which had probably metal rebar. So when you see the difference, you can almost double your seed growth by simply making a structure out of natural material and measure and predict in advance what building is going to cause a seed to grow. That is a breakthrough. Every university architect should be taught this.
Yeah, absolutely. It should definitely be taught in the curriculums of universities, but unfortunately, nobody is really talking about this.
We're starting that here. Starts now.
Yes, absolutely. How long more I have?
Maybe more I have? Five more minutes, unfortunately, 5 or 6. But please.
Okay.
Just go.
Okay, I keep going. This is another slide. I love the work of Jerry Tennant, and I think what we were looking at about all of these slides talking about electric fields. So why electric fields are so beneficial to life? I think Jerry Tennant has a lots of insights of why this is so important. One of the reasons is because the cellular voltage of our cells in a healthy state should have around -25 millivolts. If that voltage changes, that equals disease. It's as simple as that. So the root cause of most of the diseases have to do with electrical voltage, including cancer. And particularly, and especially also when you are healing, when you're trying to heal, your body goes in -50 or even more. And if your body cannot produce that electrical voltage, then that's where chronic disease occur. That's where chronic pain occur. And this is, as I mentioned, the root cause of most diseases really has to do with cellular voltage. And interestingly,
Jerry's book is called Healing is Voltage, and he actually visited us here in France to discuss this. It was wonderful. Go ahead. Yes.
Oh, amazing. Yeah, I love his work. It's very, very relevant to this conversation. And well, I don't know if I'm going to have time, but one of the very interesting things that also he elucidates is that many times also an electrical dysfunction in the cells have to do with a stored emotion in the cellular memory that basically manifests itself as a magnetic field. So there's a magnetic field that is a trauma or an emotional, it's basically, if you will measure, and he's able to measure one of the devices that he developed, he's able to measure these magnetic fields are in the body. And what's happened to magnetic fields and electrical fields is that they are inversely proportional. So if you have an electric field and you put a very strong magnetic field next to it, you will that electric field will diminish. So that's what compromises the electrical voltage, and what creates the root of the disease in the first place. So he explains this beautifully. And one of the reasons I mentioned this as well, Dan, and I think is very interesting, is because we actually are using a lot of steel in buildings, iron, and iron iron augments the magnetic fields, so that will decrease the electrical voltage of your body on itself. And I think this is really really interesting to mention. And this is here. This is from a documentary called Geopathic Stress. And actually I send this to every one of my clients because it's a very instructive documentary about geopathic stress and how it works and how to prevent it. So you have these pictures here of how you have an electrical field. The electrical field is 154. You put a magnet, it goes down to 99, right? The same thing happens as Ken Wheeler demonstrates. If you have a cathode ray tube and you stick a magnet, you destroy that electric field. So that's exactly what happens in the body, and why your body cannot sustain that electric field, and why it leads to disease. This is also part of the documentary, so you can see how they measure magnetic lines. So you have these two guys. This documentary is brilliant, and it really explains a lot of things. So one of these guys is a scientist, the other one is a dowser. So they actually corroborate their work. One measures with dowsing, the other one just have a sensitive magnetometer that is able to measure those magnetic lines.
What's the title of that documentary?
Geopathic Stress documentary. You can find it in YouTube as that. Geopathic Stress.
Look up geopathic stress. And we should explain that steel, because the iron has been heated, is what destroys that dielectric constant. We're almost out of time, but please, a few more pictures of your beautiful buildings here. Yes.
Okay, let me run very quickly. So I just gonna probably jump. So this also is in the documentary. They show this house that whatever was designed with the materials, the proportions, the forms. This house actually, when they were measuring these lines, they will disappear as they will approach the house. So they were investigating about this building, and they find out that the lady actually that was living in this house, she was actually living for over 100 years, which is very interesting. So, and then there's this polarity between the magnetic materials and paramagnetic materials. It's not that the ones are good and the other ones are bad, but we need to use them in certain way when we design architecture in order to leverage their properties. And that's very important to really understand how to design bioarchitecture. I like to show this. I mean, this slide also talking about iron. Like, we don't realize when we are inside of a building, we don't see the steel, but you can see those pictures. It's like how much steel is inside of most of these microstructures.
That's what's shorting out your electric field, exactly. Juan, maybe just show a few more pictures, but maybe during that, Radha wants to ask a question, I think. But keep more pictures while we're doing it.
Okay.
See, see, Juan, narrate that one about the water jet. That's gorgeous. That he's studying.
I love this.
It's gorgeous. It's gorgeous.
I love this because that's also what's happening in the Kelvin generator. So when you have water in movement, the water is able to create an electrical charge that then accumulates in these capacitors, and then they electric polarize, and then they're able to produce like a really high voltage discharge up to like 10 kilovolts. So most of people don't realize how much energy actually water is producing, and that's also how
it's
electricity is
piezoelectric.
created in the atmosphere. Yeah.
It's piezoelectric water, as Schauberger demonstrated, and it's literally a vortex of implosion. So the vortex of implosion in water is exactly what a vortex of implosion in an electric field is. Same principle. And Juan did some pioneering work on that and Schauberger's work, and we're out of time, but a few more
We're
slides.
out of time. Okay.
Well,
Okay, let me go very quickly. Anyway, this is very interesting. I found these images in Instagram. They basically are showing like how as a sacred structure in Thailand, a temple is actually, probably they
wonderful.
saturated the dielectric
That's right.
charge, and then it started to actually
Sap the clouds.
discharge it on the top. And if you actually notice, that picture is taken in the sunset. It's actually a sunset, an Agnihotra moment, and that's why it's probably saturating that dielectricity.
Yeah, because it's longitudinal embedding there. It's gorgeous. Good work, Juan.
This is also very interesting. It's a Corona motor electrostatic motor. The motor is connected to the ground, and then basically there's an antenna that goes up with a drone about 100 meters, and you can see the motor running. So it's just atmospheric electricity. That's another way to look at it. You can go on YouTube and watch many of these videos, and that's how so many ancient temples were just basically using that principle to harvest this dielectric discharges that we are talking about.
And so do Juan's buildings. But Juan, I think we have to introduce our next speaker, that Eric Dollar.
Okay.
Gorgeous work.
Okay.
Well, we need to give Juan a more time next time, but you can contact Juan at bioarc.co. Look at the building work he's been doing. It's incredible. We just didn't have time here. But Juan, you're my hero, Juan, really.
Oh, you're my hero as well. Thank you so much for inviting me tonight. It was a pleasure.
To be continued. And let's share this and people to invite you to contact bioarc.co. And so hopefully maybe we'll have time for questions later. We'll see. But now we should introduce our next speaker.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Juan. Really fabulous. Let's see if we have time for questions later. So I now have the privilege of introducing Alosha, and how this came about was we were looking to have another speaker here. We talked to Michael Rice, and Michael Rice recommended Alosha, who's really quite famous in his own right. He's been working with our old friend Michael Tellinger in South Africa, designing eco-villages, eco-community, natural spaces, and then he's pioneered how to turn a Russian village into an eco space for pennies on the dollar. And he's really got that youth and enthusiasm to make this happen. So let's see, I think now if Alosha, if you want to share your screen.
Yeah.
And
yeah, I will do that.
Maybe Juan, if you want to stop screen sharing, yes. And Alosha, you're on. Thank you for being here.
Okay, can you see my screen share?
I already stopped this screen sharing, I believe. Is it?
So this
Oh, there we go.
Geometrical building. Can you see
Great.
it?
Yes, it's gorgeous.
Okay, hi Dan, hi guys. Thank you, Michael, for bringing me onto the show. My inspiration with sacred geometry actually started with Michael Rice in 2006. When I saw his Fibonacci spiral mirrored, like this white lines you see behind the drawing. And then I started to see various shapes with tracing paper. And I drew them out with pencil. And at the time I was reading Victor Schauberger book, and very much inspired by, let me just see. Okay, here we go. So yeah, basically designing a whole bunch of shapes from sacred geometrical patterns. Victor Schauberger inspired me to see water patterns and how water moves in vortices. So this drawing on the top left, you can see a little kudu horn at the bottom there, imploder. So I started going onto the whole implosion, and I met Dan Winter through his website at the time and saw the work that he had been doing with sacred geometry. And basically the drawings took me to start developing little homes that have these technologies built into them. And also I have attended a biogeometry workshop with Ibrahim Karim And that inspired me to create some sort of mixed up orgonite and biogeometry antennas on top of our buildings that could do all those amazing things that Juan just spoke of. Also got inspiration to, I'm an inventor, so it was from clothing that could stop electromagnetic radiation with certain magnets and stones and biogeometry placed at certain chakra points and places on your outfit. And, but my love for geometry started actually back in 2000 when I just finished school, and basically my mom said, okay, son, it's time to go get a job. And I couldn't get it. I worked for one day and then I decided that the hell with it. So I started basically making decorations out of ultraviolet wool and polystyrene balls for clubs and trance parties. And then it turned into fabric, spandex. So with spandex, I tried to make the rooms curvilinear because I just found that all the spaces are so square and uninhabitable. You know, our bodies are so liquid and organic, and so is nature. And suddenly we're all living in these boxes. So, you know, spandex was a good way for me to break through into, decorating spaces. And then after an introduction to Michael Rice and all that geometry, I designed my first ferrocement roof. It's just a design. And then after that, I traveled to a first ferrocement workshop in 2007. Okay, just pause. So I'll get to ferrocement workshop, but basically with my Van Deco business, I prototyped the geodesic domes, which of course are filled with sacred geometry, the pentagon, the hexagon, and started experimenting with these buildings more in an event and exhibition space. And then I attended my first ferrocement workshop in Mexico with Steve Kochler. And I know you guys have been talking about steel and rebar, but the stuff that you make out of it is amazing. And we don't have bamboo growing in Russia. So, I do have to find alternatives because I definitely feel that natural materials are a way to go. But ferrocement is just extraordinary material. So coming back to South Africa, excuse me, how's my voice, Dan? Can you hear me? I know there's a bit of an echo here. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you well, I think. Well, maybe I raised
Okay.
a little bit the volume, but go ahead. If you maybe.
Okay, so yeah, so coming back to South Africa, of course, starting small. So I created a little dog kennel washing machine, and then I took a full-scale 11 by 6.5 meter ferrocement seashell roof. On my farm, then I moved out to the farm because I couldn't stay in the city any longer. I thought that the land is going to heal me, which it didn't, but more about that later. So I would sink a geodesic sphere underground, preparing for 2012. I had a bit of a prepper mentality at the time, and it has a dream catcher strung in it. So me and my family could sit underground when the earth moved in the sphere. So here she is. And then I was creating in these geodesic domes very much and have clean water coming out for use of the toilets and vegetable growing. So, very much inspired by sacred geometry, I decided to create a mandala garden, and I burned my fingers really bad because if you try and create a mandala garden on a hill, it's really a disaster because the bottom beds, being the C shape, they catch the water, but the top beds, the garden beds, divert the water, and suddenly you have a desert. And go big or go home was one of my psychological programs that I acquired from my father. So I made this 0.5 hectare organic garden and double dug it 60 centimeters deep. And the next thing, because I didn't follow permaculture principles of contour line design, half of my garden washed away in the rain to the bedrock. so I started playing with, at the same time, with Super Adobe bags, and attended a Cal Earth workshop and built this little home, which I already used the little entrance windows here. They're all facing north, east, all the different directions. So you basically have a sunlight that comes in, and on the opposite wall you make a marking, so you can, the sun actually tells you when winter, yeah, like summer solstice and winter equinoxes are, autumn equinoxes are. So you have basically different times of the year that get marked out by this calendar with these round windows. Then I got inspired by, went and visited Mike Reynolds in Taos, and just got blown by his architecture, that fully autonomous buildings that, harvest water, provide electricity, and fully off the grid. And at the same time, I've attended a Cal Earth workshop and learned about the vaulting and domes and arches, which was very inspirational. I mean, like here at Cal Earth, we saw how a building gets designed, like these benches, by looking at the shade that gets casted on the floor from the building behind it. So it's a series of domes, and the shade that they cast on the floor, actually they use that to mark out these benches. So I know we can have ideas on paper how things should be, but in reality, we should, listen to and get inspiration from nature. And that's why it's important to sometimes get off paper and get on the land, because there are different ideas that come to mind when you're doing something in practice versus conceptualizing it on paper. And of course, wetlands, water has been my big thing, because without water, we can't move anywhere. So of course, treatment of water, that's Mike Reynolds' drawing, and I started creating wetlands to treat gray water and pool water. That's my other mentor, John Todd, which was able to treat radioactive waste through these clear containers and allow the water to, basically go through different containers. And it was really, really toxic chemical waste from factories. So the first tank would have different plants to the second tank, and they would be inoculated with the same healthy ecosystems like ponds and lakes and marshes, but they'll be inoculated 4 times a year at 4 different seasons, and with the same material. But the first tank would grow different plants and algae that could take the harshest chemicals, and the second tank would change and so on. So the plants rearrange themselves to what they can handle. Of course, very important to keep in mind that besides pretty designs, being in Russia, we need to consider things like the law of thermodynamics. So an ideal wall would have a certain amount of mass and a good amount of insulation, because then the mass can store the heat throughout, collect the heat throughout summer and release it slowly in wintertime. This drawing is again from Mike Reynolds. And of course, the movement of the sun is very important, because this is what I tend to, I wasn't doing when I started with the all sacred geometrical drawings, because I just made it this mandala homes that had no relation to the sun or the wind. And the Earthship was a perfect opportunity a perfect example to see how that all works. As you can see in summer, the sun is, the overhang is shading the room, and in winter that sunlight comes through into the room. So the designs of our buildings, besides sacred geometrical, need to reflect and adapt to exactly where we are in the world and the angles of the sun, the water flows. Like some of you guys may want to have a house that's buried. We have a water level water table like 2 feet below, or even a foot below ground in springtime. So if I have a house that's buried, it's I'd be walking in water all day long, and I'd have mold problems constantly. So again, adapting to your environment. There's a workshop I attended with Mike Reynolds in Malawi, where we built the sacred geometrical flower. Petal was 8 flowers. Then very much inspired by this new technology that's coming out. It's a plugin for rhinoceros. I want to bring in technology and natural building into one cohesive ecosystem. So here is a program called Rhino Vault, which basically you set a parameters where the entrances are, where the structure lands, and it calculates the shell, the roofing for you. But this design has to have a very intricate form to build it. So you have to have a whole like waffle style form that the bricks lay on top. So I thought, but what if we can use augmented reality, where we can have bricks? I don't have the slide here, but if we can have put augmented reality, and it tells us where the next brick is going to be placed. So with a fast setting mortar such as gypsum, we could have the first layer of bricks being set without having a form. So this is where I'm heading with this. So now in the last 2 years, I started designing buildings, redesigning the earthship, bringing in sacred geometry, and of course for cold climate. So here is Larry McQuell, cold climate architecture, which can house a yurt on top or geodesic greenhouse, has some cheap secondhand water tanks. So again, the way I design is something that can be very affordable for a person, because people right now are very tight on cash. You know, the economy is literally on its knees. And so we need to design buildings that are fully autonomous, that we are not connected to the grid, but at the same time, don't make a hole in our pocket. So here's one of the latest the buildings I did with a sauna in the center, and a reactor of hemp blocks or straw bale blocks on the outside. Obviously, everything is waterproof, but in this reactor will be sewage and wood chips that will heat up pretty high, as per Jean Payne's method from France, who tested this, heating up the sauna space and having additional heat stored in the berm, so the back of the house is buried. So I'll be showing you this design from different angles now, but basically the both tunnels, the difference between an earthship and my designs is an earthship dumps all of their heat out into atmosphere, you know, creating the suction convection engine. So through this blue tube, the cold air comes in through the back burial, and then it goes through the house, and then they dump it out. Instead of dumping it out, I want to take it through this tube. Let's see if we can find another drawing. I want to take it through the tube in the geodesic greenhouse, which is the highest point, and send it basically underneath the home and through all these pipes, heating up the back berm. So there is a burial behind all these pipes, but I want to create it passively. So without use of fans, or at most one fan. So I've designed these solar tubes, which are basically reflectors, like a torch on the back. And on the front is polycarbonate. They're of course in Vesica Pisces shape, and they have a black 6-meter pipe that basically going to create a draft, a lot of suction during summertime, pulling all the hot air through the berm and warming it up for 6-7 months of the year. Because the problem we're having in Russia is that it's completely overcast for 5 months of the year. And maybe Dan could confirm that there in Europe, a lot of parts are very overcast, you know, for a few months of the year. So we don't have the luxury of Taos, New Mexico climate. We're 60 degrees north. The sun comes up at 11 o'clock, sets at 4, and that whole time it's overcast. So we really want to rely on the sun during summertime to heat up a 3-4 meter wall behind the tires and this entire home. So the reason that I'm doing this is a house that can be fully no additional heating during wintertime, because in Russia they're burning a lot of wood to heat up their homes. Of course, in Europe now there's gas, but gas has shortages. But you know, you don't want to stay cold, and it was unpredictable weather. We want to have our homes keeping us warm and comfortable throughout the year. So I mean, these are just some pictures you're all aware of how our forests are being destroyed at ridiculous rate. So really the reason I'm building this and the reason that I am using some metal in the roof is, first of all, to stop the electromagnetic radiation from entering the space, and the rest of the walls and floors obviously natural. And the second is because I don't want to use any wood in construction. That's the overcast. The winters are really cold, -25, -30 Celsius. So the house that I'm designing is literally geared up for that. So here's some of the designs that I've done, and the left one on the bottom, we've just have 70% completed. I'll show you pictures from yesterday. We just ran a 3-week workshop in Brazil. So as you can see, the top design here is what I've been building in Russia. I'll show you now, but that uses biogeometry 45-degree angle. So basically the house generates a BG3 energy, which is high harmonic of gold, high harmonic of ultraviolet, and negative green carrier wave. It's a whole lecture on its own, and Ibrahim Karim has invested 50 years into biogeometry. I highly recommend you look up, but basically he was able to stop electromagnetic radiation just through certain shapes and turn the harmful effects of EMR into healing vibrations. So we're not stopping them, we're actually transferring them into healing vibrations or taking out the harmful vertical green wave, okay? Which most of man-made structures unfortunately have. So here is another design of the, so as you can see, I'm using Vesica Pisces in my latest designs. Just like on the one on the left bottom here, also designed on Vesica Pisces, which is very much inspired by Dan Winter and all the work you have been doing. Just another drawing of all the pipe work. So there from the greenhouse, I take it into a blue barrel. I'm sure you're aware of some of the geothermal heating systems. And basically it takes the warm air underneath the wetlands. These in greenhouses are the wetlands as per the Earthship tech. And then the septic here in the spiral is warmed up. And then all of that meets up in underneath the sauna space that you can climb in and maintain. So everything meets there and then distributes through one fan everywhere else. And then once the solar chimneys kick in, then the fan stops. I'm also taking hot air from underneath my floor because the sunlight will enter. I'll show you the side view now. The floor, so we don't want the floor to keep hot, so we'll be tapping that heat off and send it to the back berm as well. The pipe works.
I'm sorry
yeah?
to interrupt. It's Valerie here. I see the time is running. It's 1:08, and there is a break at 1:10. So it's up to you.
Okay.
You want to wrap?
Okay, I'm gonna run through quickly.
Question.
So
Thank you.
Okay, so yeah, so these are some designs. This is what I built in Russia. It took me 3 months to dig out by hand. So it does take time. Natural building is very labor intensive. And then rainbows, I want to utilize Peter Erikstein's rainbow, large rainbow tech in the houses. So because I believe the houses need to be like temples. Dream catchers in our homes, because if you're spending 5 months of the year in your home because of winter, you want to have climbing nets that you can climb throughout, and obviously this can create beautiful geometry and good resonance. The home is like a temple. So like another thing I'm developing is a calendar, an interstellar calendar that you can be inside and look at different when Mercury retrogrades. But that's a whole separate lecture, but basically a kaleidoscope that you can sit inside this onion thing. But I want to show you the pictures. These are some of my workshops that we've built. That's in South Africa. And this is a water tank. So I love curves. Curves are natural. And this is it. This is what we finished yesterday in 3 weeks. A Vesica Pisces sacred geometrical building. Obviously still needs a roof, but here is an outdoor spiral shower, an aircrete dome, and a sandbag dome. It's mostly earth, only 9% cement. Very cool structure. So this is 3 weeks. About 10 of us, we're going at full power, and then a wetland is going to be on the front. So that's the house on the left bottom. You can see the design and you can see how it's all coming together.
That is fabulous.
Yeah. And this is, so the home has almost become, Dan, your inspiration of Vesica Pisces and sacred geometry, this is it. This is 15 years after I got introduced to your work. 15 years later, I'm starting to design buildings that are practical and, you know, that utilize the water tech.
Yeah, and you've got implosion going on there. It's good. You've got mostly natural materials. You have high capacitance. It's very nice. It's gorgeous.
Thank you. So that's it. Are there any questions?
Yes, there are. Because we discussed yesterday together, Alicia, you were talking about your situation in Russia and how it's possible to have land very cheap and even abandoned villages. But before, I would like to read the questions What I wanted to
Mhm.
know from Rata is materials used in cold and rainy climate, because I saw the buildings of Ran were mostly with bamboo. Can we use bamboo in cold climate? Does it need a special
It
cold
doesn't grow, but it doesn't grow in cold climate.
to keep it for a longer time?
Yeah, I think what you just said. I mean, if naturally it doesn't grow in cold climates, we shouldn't use it. We should use something that is available in the surrounding environment. I think bamboo makes a lot of sense for tropical weather conditions and that particular location where there is, you're going to be open structures. You don't need to think about heating and all of these other concerns. Architecture reflects the environment, so you can't build with something that is not in the environment itself and doesn't work with that environment specifically.
And you need to understand the nature of materials. So whilst bamboo is great for tropical climates, like Juan said, we have to have a certain amount of mass, because if you're living in a uninsulated environment, you have to be burning a lot of wood to keep yourself up at minus 25 Celsius to plus 25.
Yeah.
It's a 50-degree jump. So if we have, that's why those Russian stoves, the masonry stoves, they're so large, because it goes through all the vents, and you fire that thing up once and it keeps you warm for 2 days. So, we just need to understand what we're designing and where we're designing. That's where the permaculture comes in so beautifully.
We have a friend, Michael Rice, so has been so active in this field. Michael, you wanted to say something also? Maybe open your mic. I will.
Yeah. Hi, everyone.
Hi, Mike.
Hello, Mike.
Can you?
How are you?
Welcome, Michael. Welcome, Michael.
Yeah, Zana and I are here very much enjoying the presentation, and just would like to say a few things. Alosha, fantastic presentation. Juan, Dan, what we particularly absolutely respect across the board is the application of real life experience and in service to the next step, in service to what's going on. I mean, we are literally in kindergarten, all of us. Literally, we have an alphabet awaiting us. We have A, B, and a little bit of C if we're lucky. And even if we were to get understanding of this vast unknown alphabet waiting for discovery and waiting for conscious integration, and then we can start to make sentences with the planet. Then we can start to write poetry. And the key would be to unlock the next. The key is beauty. We've been saying this, but beauty beyond geometric rigidity, beauty beyond some cultural notions, something that is emanating from the inside. And it's difficult to define. It's by definition impossible to define, because it's an emanation from the soul. It's a language of the heart. And we can use all of these modalities and models, technologies and languages as a pen, at best, a pencil, let's say. And but the rest is really opening. And this is why we cannot, in our humble experience and opinion, we cannot divorce the necessity to establish integrity within ourselves, clarity of thought and feeling and mind and emotion, to clear the blocks, clear the presumptions, clear the so on. I know this is dangerously wishy-washy, because it's heading into the unknown. That's what we're inviting, but it's absolutely a vital component if we're going to take this forward. And so absolute multiple levels of hats off to you guys and girls for giving this voice, for giving this an opportunity to be part of the conversation. And not just the conversation, but the symphony. Not just the symphony, but the universal song. So we have this together, and very, very, very inspiring to see the application, the real world application of, and again, Alosha, we'd love to say to you and to everyone that the honesty that you are expressing, like when you said you burnt your fingers because you did this huge amount of work and then realized you made a big mistake. Not many people would do that. So we want to say that that's how we learn, by making mistakes and understanding better. And I'm I'm absolutely full of mistakes. I've got a history of trying something naively or overly enthusiastically and then seeing the result. And this is why we have got to the point of realization that there's more going on than just the application of materiality, shape, and form. There's a hell of a lot more going on. And in many, many of the structures, of the hundreds of structures that we have designed and seen built, the reality is when you talk to the people a year, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years later and see what has happened, that can't be ignored. And that has nothing to do with testing and has nothing to do with measurement. This is the truth. And so if our architecture is not in service to the holistic expansion of consciousness and the playfulness of what's calling, then it is at best just a pretty space. And that's really where we need to take it. So all of the conversations here are part of the ABC. And but let's keep talking, let's keep sharing. Thank you, Valerie, for the opportunity.
Michael, it was his idea to invite you. We thought about Michael, and thank you for your short presentation. You did it anyway, Michael, and he has provided so much drawings. He did this intuitive. He said, "Don't say what you need," and he draws the house, and the people were in. Oh, how did you know? He just channeled people's house. And you have many, well, maybe next time. And to conclude, Alosha, would you like to say something to conclude? And how can we keep with you, Michael?
Yes, I would like to say something. Like Michael was saying about the homes, I would like to chime on that most important is that we heal our trauma, because you can be living in the most beautiful house. If you have a burning sensation in your heart and throat, it usually here sits, and your legs are shaking in anxiety, no sacred geometry or resonators are going to help you with any healing. They will make you feel somewhat better, but I believe we need to deal with our traumas, and this is what we share on our YouTube channel. So please come and join and be part of the truth that we need to open up a can of worms and look at our past and deal with those situations so we can get our wings and, you know, fly forward. And that's how we can build communities, because a 3-week workshop just showed me that I ain't ready to get into any community with anybody at the moment. Mm-hmm. And that's the truth. Until people realize that we are traumatized and we do need healing, because right now everybody's got the smile and I'm fine, everything is perfect. Mm-hmm. And that's not the case. I'm sorry. Mm-hmm. So I'd like to add to what Michael was saying. It starts in the inner work, and very specific inner work. Yes. And that's what we share on our YouTube channel, which I posted here in chat.
I hope you can watch.
That's the point. That
presentation yesterday with Rakesh on sociocracy, which is an amazing tool that really help us to create together and not anybody to feel left behind. And we can't have a perfect consensus, but how do we deal with in a community so everybody feels heard and we do our best? I don't have the right word, but he did amazing work. So I hope you can catch up.
Yes. And people can reconnect with Michael Rice, and we can't thank enough Juan Schlosser, and they're all at bioarchitects.net. And we're going to be adding Alosha to that team and on that site also. So there's lots of ways to reach everybody here. We'd love to stay in touch, and we're so grateful. And Juan, again, your contribution to science here is so wonderful. And Michael, he's the shaman of the group. And Alosha, he's the young energy that keeps us going. So thank you. And Valerie's the pure intention. So it's all good.
Please write your web page so everybody can connect with you if we can extend our sharing. Sarah, thank you very much. You wanted to say something, another thing?
And instead of, we wanted to have 25 minutes for a break, but instead we will have only 15 minutes. But however, it has been wonderful to meet all of you. And we'll certainly go on all your websites to see. It has been absolutely fantastic. I wasn't even imagining. I didn't know something was existing like that. So thanks a lot.
Thank you. Blessings.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you, Juan. Thank you,
And,
Losha. Thank you,
Thank
Michael.
you, everybody. Thank you,
uh,
Michael. Thank you, Dan.
You
Thank you,
Blessings,
Valerie.
blessings.
something about Russia, your situation in Russia,
Oh,
which
land is so
book,
guys, land is so cheap. You can get a whole village, which there are 40,000 abandoned village, and every week there are more and more abandoned village. They have electricity, they have roads to them, and they have long forgotten food forests. Most of the houses have fallen. You can buy a home that's still in okay condition that will need some quite serious renovating, maybe $5,000, $6,000 at most. But you can buy a hectare of land with a home on it for about $2,000 with 1,000 fruit trees around you, and you will have it all to yourself. So I'm seeing communities where we're not joining, like the picture behind me, 70 families on 110 hectares. I'm not seeing that. I'm seeing each family has their own piece of land, and the price of land in Russia really, really allows that. And it comes with fruit trees and homes and clean drinking water and electricity, and you can have it all for $2,000 and start building your life. So if you want to reach out, connect with me, and we'll form a forum that will assist you with paperwork and so on. So I believe Russia is the last pocket of freedom on earth, with no slave mentality, like South Africa, like Philippines, like Brazil, and so on. So
Okay. Alosha, thank you very much. We will all come to Russia. However, I heard that there are many European, in all countries. In Italy, you have the house for €1. So anyhow, we can go anywhere, and there are many things that we can find and discover. But thank you so much. And I will put on the music as well as the poem of Amar from Brazil for our break.
okay.